At the age of 21, Simone de Beauvoir was one of the youngest persons to take the philosophy exam, and clearly she passed. So today I will use her sex and gender theory to talk about how society should be operated and the issue that we are facing nowadays about gender in sport. There's a hot issues about gender identity in participating in sport. There has been so much debate about whether gender should be allowed to join a sport team that matches their identity or not. Furthermore, in Title IX, the U.S. Department of Education proposed a new rule change that would allow schools to reject some gender athletes from competing. The sport legislation said that all students who will be on sport team and compete will be based on their gender assigned at birth. Why are humans limiting human right to live freely and fully? So let's just talk about how Simone de Beauvoir distinction between sex and gender. So let's talk a little bit about Simone de Beauvoir. Have you ever considered the significance of using man to refer to a human being? Simone de Beauvoir, she was a philosopher, novelist, and the first feminist. Her best known work is The Second Sex. Beauvoir's theory argues that women are labeled as the other and thought to be secondary to men. Today, I will use the Beauvoir's distinction between sex and gender to suggest that human rights should include the freedom to join a sport team that matches one's gender identity. According to Beauvoir, gender means that one is not born but rather becomes a woman. She states that biological sex and social cultural gender are two different categories. She said that man has made woman the other in society, and women are defined by men. Women only become a woman because of the circumstances of their society, not their choice. I think we exist and create our meaning through the choices we make, and to live authentically, people must live their own life and accept their radical freedom. Beauvoir's argument about real freedom for human beings is still worth concerning today. Before discuss about the issue of gender in sport, let's talk a little bit about the definition of sex and gender. The term sex refers to the characteristics that are biologically defined and differences in anatomy, while gender indicates the references to society and culture and how people identify themselves as. People commonly misunderstand sex and gender are the same category, generate confusion and heated controversy. But by having the knowledge of the distinction between sex and gender, we will seek a positive contribution to society and expand freedom for human rights. Gender athletes do have unfair advantage in sport, according to Kevin Frekin from Washington AP News. Transgender athlete whose biological sex assigned at birth was male would be barred from competing. For the girls or women sport team under the legislation push, the participation of transgender people in competitive sport is always a controversial issue. Based on Beauvoir's theory, sex is assigned at birth based on physiological characteristics who is male and females. On the other hand, people can identify gender as a man or a woman, which is different from their natal sex, Women need access to the same kind of activity as men, as well as for men to women. This is why there shouldn't be any discrimination in sport. Humans must have the right to join sport team that matches one gender identity. Simone de Beauvoir does not address the freedom issue that gender presents, but we can develop the theory to suggest how norms work to expand the exercise of gender freedom. People feel deeply rooted by being told that they are not manly or womanly, or being banned from participating in activity for the gender they identify themselves as. Athletes who transition from female to male or male to female should be allowed to compete without restriction. By doing that, we create a non-discrimination, non-harassment society and a better place where everyone receives equal rights. If we allow people to have the right to define their identity, we should also let them live freely with it. Acknowledgement. By having the acknowledgement of sex and gender, they are two different categories. From Simone de Beauvoir's distinction between sex and gender, we suggest the idea of a fair society, particularly that human rights should include freedom to join a sport team that matches one gender. Beauvoir has opened the door for us to get a hang of how its norm works, and society should operate for people to live freely. The insistence on separating sport teams strictly by sex should be changed.